stories of people studying philosophy in a coffee shop. It's painfully stereotypical. Um, I was working on my degree, and I would sit at the bar at a coffee shop that I also worked at as a barista. That's the really stereotypical part, is somebody studying an advanced degree in philosophy works in a coffee shop. Better than McDonald's, right? The old joke, like, why would you like fries with that? I hate that joke. It's a terrible joke. Nobody says anything like that in philosophy. Um, that's psychology. Get it straight, everybody. Um, so I'm there multiple days, and these two young strapping gentlemen would come in and sit down next to me every day, basically, and they would each open up their little Macs, and one of them would walk back and forth in and out of the shop very quickly. I had no idea what he was doing. The other one would sit quietly and just kind of pound away on his keyboard, and Patrick was the one who would walk in and out of the shop very quickly on his phone, always.
Is that a true story?
Oh yeah, dude, you did it so much. You'd like get up real quick and then like walk out, and you'd like pull your phone up to your head as you're walking out. Now I recognize like you're taking work calls. At the time, um, being incredibly naive, I was like, oh, they started a software company. It's a group of developers that just sit around, and there's really no business side to this. Again, I've only been in grad school at this point, like, so I don't know anything. Didn't realize you were
Was
actually
there like
talking to
was this like
customers.
a joke, like a joke at the coffee shop?
No, no one thought you were a joke at the coffee shop. In fact, I remember uh, Kathy, the owner, being like, "Well, he's busy. Like he's for real. He is like a business-minded individual. Like he's not here to hang out and joke around at the coffee shop and sit at the bar. He's here to work. He just happens to want to have good coffee while he does it." These guys would come in and sit down next to me, and I was using a um, particular program for writing my papers, my academic papers. I still to this day can't stand Microsoft Word. And when I was in California doing a master's degree, I was in the middle of a semester and I was starting to work on my term paper, and somebody showed me the glories of this program called LaTeX or LaTeX, and I was like, wait a minute, I don't have to worry about margins anymore. I'm like, no, you just give it some commands and it'll generate a beautiful PDF for you. And I was like, this is the future for me. And so in the middle of a semester, I started trying to learn this thing while writing my term paper. About halfway through it, I got frustrated because, like any program, if you don't play by the rules, it won't generate your PDF at the end. And so I had messed up somewhere, and I was like, okay, forget it. I'm going back to Word. I have to finish this paper. And I went back to Word and got so angry with Word again that I was like, I'm just going to learn it. And so I stayed up a few nights and learned LaTeX, and then like started writing all of my papers in that. So I'd be at the coffee shop and I would be writing papers there, and the only other thing I could do on my computer at the time was check my email. And so those are basically the two things I would do. Maybe like pull up some articles for papers I was working on. One day Patrick looks over, and again, keep in mind, the only thing I know about these two guys is they started a software company. That is the extent of it. They went to Casey, and Patrick had this like incubator program at RIT, and they started a software company. That is the extent of my knowledge of these two guys. And so Patrick leans over one day and he's like, are you writing in LaTeX? And I was like, yeah. And so I gave him the rundown on like what this thing is and why it was so great. Again, not knowing what their company was and the type of software it produced, which is not all that dissimilar from what I was doing. I basically gave him a sales pitch on why some type of structure in your documents makes a lot of sense. So, and then Patrick does his little thing where he grins because he knows exactly what you're talking about, but won't tell you that. And he just wants to let you talk. So I did that, and he did that, gave me his little grin back. And then I made a joke at the end, like pretty much everything in life, where I'm like, yeah, so I can check my email and I can use this tool. So if you guys ever need an employee, let me know. And I really thought that was like the extent of it because it was a joke. Because I'm like, oh, they're all developers. I'm obviously not a developer. So here's a funny joke. Patrick's like, ah, yeah. Casey laughs, and like we all go on with our lives. And I don't know if it wasn't that time, but there was another time in there. Patrick told me, you told me this like, I don't know, a year ago, 2 years ago. What finally, like, he didn't actually contact me about a job until 3 years later, um, which was timing worked out really well for me. Um, but one of the things he said that kind of like
I mean,
gave him at least some
I can
inclination.
I can
What was
just
that?
tell you what this is.
Okay, tell
This
me.
is easy. There was a thing. We were both in a coffee shop one day. You had a problem with something, and I said, "Well, I think you can fix that with the command line if you go and you like change a setting." And I was like, you were asking me how to fix it or something like that, and I was trying to get you to stop asking me. I
And
was
I was
like
like, I don't know
busy
what
with
I'm talking
something,
about. Yeah.
so then, like, I think I left or whatever, and I came back the next day, and you're like, "Oh yeah, I figured it out." And you're like, "I just like got this command, and I ran this, and I did this, and da 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 da." And I was like, "Oh, he figured that out himself. That's interesting. That is not a thing most people would have done. Most people would have just lived with that." At that
Yeah.
point in time, I was like, "Okay, well." I had seen enough at that point. I was like, "All right, this guy would do well in this industry."
So there we go. So 3 years later, Patrick offers me a job. My teaching prospects were low because the job market for philosophy professors is awful. And I was like, this works out great timing wise. So then I was like, okay, well, now I have to learn this. I have to learn data. I have to learn this tool. I have to learn all of these things. And then this is the part that Patrick finds hilarious, I think, is that when I started taking the learning data courses by myself in the evenings, I decided it was probably best to learn all of the XML structure. So I did the exact thing I was told not to do, which was don't read the data spec straight through. So I just started doing that, and then I started taking the courses. And instead of using our system to learn data and learn how to write it, I actually opened the text editor and I did the whole thing in the markup. So I forced myself to like go through each lesson of learning data and write it in a text editor. So I had to use like angle bracket, like close the tag so that I knew exactly what it was. And then I uploaded those files into our system to see if they would actually work, and they were formatted correctly.
Well, so when you came in though, you were coming from kind of an interesting background. One of the things that I love about like your kind of origin story for getting into technical writing is that I think this is kind of the direction that a lot of people come in, which is
Hmm.
just from some random other walk of life, right?
Yeah.
Like you talk to so many people who become, technical writers or they become information developers or they, excuse me, they arrive in this industry and none of them ever like intended to come here. Like I mean, not none of them. Let's say not none of them.
It's a small
A higher,
number though. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. It's like everybody's got this like really interesting origin story, like this like backstory of how they became um, a technical writer or they came into being like somebody who's an information developer.
The nice thing is that the people who do get into this, a lot of us do come from weird backgrounds or atypical backgrounds. Like, it's not a trajectory of like I'm going to be a tech writer. A lot of us are writers from some other way, and then frankly, like making a living in tech writing is much easier than making a living in excuse me in creative writing. And so there's a good career path to be made in tech writing, information development, specifically if you get structured authoring content. I mean, you get structured content experience, because it does require an extra skill set above just understanding the English language and using it, because you have to understand the technology behind it. So there's a good path there, and it's one of those paths that I wish, or I hope, and I wish there were more young people that saw it early on and saw its potential early on, and I wish we could make a bigger deal out of it in the industry, that this actually is a good career path, because there's a
Well, I think that if you go and you look at like LinkedIn, I mean, I would say that's I don't know once a week, once at the minimum once a month, somebody will post on one of the groups being like, "How do you get into technical writing?"
yeah, yeah,
And um, the answers range from like, oh, well, there's courses on it, like, you know, you can go to like Virginia Tech and blah 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 blah, you know, that kind of
Yeah.
stuff, to like
Yeah.
just start writing technical stuff. Like,
Yeah.
go learn go learn one of the common standards or common formats, and you know, start working on it. Um, I think that it's one of the things that's really I've always found to be really interesting and actually like very appealing about technical writing is that I think you need more attributes than skills to start. So like you need to be somebody who's, you know, inquisitive, somebody
Yeah.
who's, you know, intelligent, somebody who's, you know, just like wanting to get into things and like has a passion for explaining them. But like you don't need to be you need to be a good writer. You don't need to be like a fantastic writer. Like you don't need you know, a BA in English to be a technical writer. I mean, you know, Lord knows you don't have one, Jared.
Lord
Um,
knows I don't have a BA in English.
um, but I mean, you know, you have to be a strong writer. But I don't even
Yeah.
actually I don't think of writing as being one of the core requirements for technical writers, honestly.
I mean, the writing can be taught pretty easily, to be honest. It's, can you take a complex idea, understand? I mean, you're an educator. You're an educator.
Yep.
Like, you don't
Yeah.
stand in front of a classroom, but you have to be able to take a complex idea, understand it well enough to communicate it, and to communicate something clearly and effectively requires a really deep understanding of something. I mean, all of the things that I understand best are things that I've had to teach at some point.
Yep.
And it's been really fun to like learn more about the technology. And then again, the better you understand it, the easier it is to communicate that. And so I think tech writing is, just calling it tech writing is almost a disservice to what tech writers have to do.
Well, that's why I like, which is why I like information developer a lot more. I think information development is a much more appropriate title.
Yeah.
It's something that really more describes what people in this field do. And I think the thing I would add to like you have to understand something is that I think the number one thing that I've seen consistently across people who are successful in information development is people who are able to grasp a concept extremely quickly without necessarily having to work inside of that concept. So,
Yeah.
you know, if you're going and you're describing how to work with this advanced piece of machinery, or you know, this complex software system or whatever it may be, like the likelihood that you actually built that system is low, right?
Yeah.
So you have to be able to go and like interact with somebody else and understand their world well enough that you can pull that information out of them, codify it, organize it, and deploy it. You know, which requires a level of understanding, and it's not easy. Like it
No.
requires very smart people, but it doesn't require people that have like, you know, a degree in it, right?
Yeah. Yeah, that's right. It's one of those things where, I mean, me getting into this position, I am forever thankful, um, because you saw a couple of things, but you still rolled the dice. I mean, I was unknown. I was an unknown quantity. You know, you look at my
My whole
resume.
career is rolling the dice, Jared.
That's
That's
all I
all I do.
do. Well, that's all I do too. Just give it a shot. Come on, baby, roll those dice. Um, but that's really what most people who want to make the transition need. They need somebody who's going to roll the dice on them and say, like, I can see a few things that I can foster in this person. Do they have a tech writing background? No. Can they communicate effectively? Do they seem to be intelligent, and are they inquisitive? Because inquisitiveness and curiosity are what are really going to drive somebody to do well in this. I remember, I think there was this unspoken rule, maybe it was spoken and I just didn't know it, when I first started, that was like, if somebody in the office has headphones on, don't bother them because they're working. I don't know if
That
this was
was that
actually.
was clearly spoken. It was called the headphones rule.
Oh, really? So,
Yeah, it had a name. Like,
oh, okay. So I just didn't pay attention to that apparently, um,
yeah,
because I was
apparently.
just like,
Go figure.
if I had a question, I was like, I can't find this online anywhere. I can't find it in our system. I would just get up and walk across the room and be like, hey, excuse me, can you help me with this? And I would just like
Yeah.
knock on somebody's desk and get the help I needed. I mean, I would smile when I do it, so I think it didn't bother people too much. Maybe it did, but
Well,
everyone
you
got
get a
over
lot. You get away with a lot. So yeah.
it.
But so the other thing I think
Curiosity,
is
curiosity.
right. The other thing I think is worth mentioning here though is like as much as getting into tech writing is probably more a function of just being committed to getting into it and having an interest and a passion and being able to perform in this type of environment. I think that you can't undersell the value of experienced tech writers.
Yeah, that's
And
right too.
the one of the things that I think is wild is just how much impact experienced information developers can have. And I think we've seen that here.
Yeah,
One or two people who are really you know very experienced, senior, strong in the field. I mean, they are just game changers for the
I
people
mean,
around them.
the speed with which they can generate well structured documentation is wildly different than someone who's just coming in and learning. Um, and that's not to disparage anyone that's learning, but when you have that skill set and it's borderline habitual for you to use it, like it's just second nature for you to use it, it is amazing to watch those people generate documentation that is accurate and it's good and it is really fast. Um, and that
Yeah,
does
and
change a lot.
I think one of the things that's crazy about that too is that you look at all the automation that's coming down the pipe, and when you look at the complexity of the work in information development, and then the result that is the simplicity of access and
Hmm.
the simplicity of use, I just don't see how you automate that anytime in the near future. Like, I think
Yeah,
you'll automate major sections of actual software development before you can automate the process of information development, which is wild. But I stand by that 100%. Like you're seeing computers write code now, and I'm not just
yeah,
talking about like low code stuff. I'm talking about like actual like write me a function that does this, and like they're going and they're like actually using AI to build that. But I don't think that you can do that with the type of information development that actually produces like strong reference and learning materials because it's a conceptual connection
yeah.
and like codification of that information. So if you want some job security,